There we go. Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of Veteran Voices in Code. I'm your host, Greg Drodney, the Student Recruitment Outreach Manager for Code Platoon. Joining me today is Francisco Avila, Code Platoon alumni and instructor. So it's kind of a cool episode to have somebody who's been through the program. Also, it teaches and helps people get through the application process and the whole deal. So, Francisco, thanks for joining me.
Of course. Thank you for having me, Greg. Appreciate it.
Yeah, so one of the things that we try to focus on here for anybody who's watched these episodes before is the diverse backgrounds of everybody involved. But I'm going to start something new here that I should have done with the last episode. I'm going to start it with you, so you get to be the inaugural person who answers this first and most important question. All right. So here's the question: what prompted you to raise your right hand and say, "I want to join the military"?
Oh, that's a great question. Wow, I wasn't expecting that. So I actually was not born in the US. I was born in Mexico, and I came here when I was 7 years old. Shortly after, I kind of just fell in love with the country. Really wanted to join the military for not really sure if there was a particular reason why I wanted to join the military. It's just an idea that I had, and I always followed it since I was a young child. From there, the majority of my mentors were previous Marine Corps retirees. I had a lot of teachers that were from the Marine Corps, and I went to an ROTC where it was Marine Corps oriented. So sure enough, immediately after high school, I joined the Marine Corps.
Fantastic. And that was going to be my second question was, was the Marine Corps always the choice, or was it the cool commercials they had? Because I got to admit, their commercials are better than the Army's. There's no denying it. Even the Army people are like, yeah, their ads are way better. So
No, I think it was more of the people that I was able to interact with while I was growing up. I always knew I wanted to join the military. I didn't know which branch. But it's thanks to the interactions that I had and the mentors that I had that it kind of felt like I wouldn't be doing a due diligence for all of the efforts if I joined a different branch. Not to speak badly on any other branch.
no, that's fair. That's fair. So you end up in the infantry, correct? You end up as a Marine Corps infantryman. Was that a choice, or did they say, hey, this guy's going to make a great infantryman? How did that work out?
Oh no, that was definitely a choice. So I wanted to join the Marine Corps infantry. And I remember I don't know if there was a specific reason for it, but it was at the time in my young mindset, I just didn't want to work in an office environment. I wanted to be outside, I wanted to be out there and running and gunning, doing what Marines do. And yeah, that was my main ambition behind infantry. Ironically, I ended up becoming a mortarman, so I kind of took away some of my running and gunning and did a lot of stationary call for fires.
Yep. Yeah, you managed to avoid that. But that's a great segue into the next series of questions, which is, I'm sure that brings up a lot of the same questions that I'm having for you right now for people watching this is, okay, so you wanted to be outside running, gunning, and not being in an office, and yet here you are. You at some point in your path of being an infantryman, you said, you know what? Now I want to be in an office. Now I want to sit in a chair. What was that like? What brought you to that decision process?
Yeah. So the first one that comes to mind would be my daughter. My daughter was born, and that definitely made me reassess a lot of things in my life. Uh,
Kids
and
have
I
a knack for doing that.
right. Right. So once she was born, it kind of just made me want to invest my life into a career where I could be more around her in her upbringing and ensure that she was okay and that I could give her the best quality of life that I can possibly offer her while being present in her life. Um, and as you know, being in the military active duty, deployments, going to the field, something happened and now everybody has to come back. It just wasn't a possibility. So with that said, how to end up in coding is I was afraid of pursuing an office path or pursuing anything that was um, more indoor oriented because I was scared that I wasn't going to be challenged or stimulated mentally. I mean, you're prior military as well. The amount of problem solving that we do on a daily basis is is
Astronomical.
right? From the moment that you wake up till your eyes close, you're thinking about the next problem or how to solve it and how to go about it. And
Or being yelled at about the next problem. One of the two.
right, yeah,
Especially the infantry. I mean, that's just standard, right?
yeah, definitely. So I had a buddy that was coding a lot, and he kind of presented me into the idea. And the more that I interacted with it, the more I realized that it's essentially just identifying a problem, coming up with a solution. And then once you could identify the proper steps to come up with that solution, even if you don't know the correct syntax or the programming language, you could always look it up, learn it slowly. But it really helped me with, or it gave me a lot of satisfaction as far as still stimulating that part of my brain of ensuring that I was being challenged on a daily basis and exercising that problem solving ability.
No, that's fantastic. And you're exactly right. You know, you came from a world where, you know, problem solving was a daily thing, especially as a mortarman. You know, like you said, call for fire is not a simple thing. I think a lot of people have this conception in their mind of just, oh, you know, you drop a bomb in a tube and launch it out there. No, there's a lot that goes into that. There certainly is. So tell me briefly, like what made you choose Code Platoon? Like what stood out about it? Was it just the military focus or something more than that?
Yeah, I think the biggest portion that led me to Code Platoon was when I had a friend who had gotten out of the Marine Corps maybe about 5 or 6 months previous to me, and he attended Code Platoon. He told me about how great of a program it was. I wasn't completely sold on it, but it does help to have some sort of like background influence. And then from there, I started reaching out to people that were his acquaintance and asking about what their experience was during the program, how everything went from start to end, and how they felt that their skills were by the time they finished the program. Luckily, I also had a couple of other friends who did different boot camps previous to me actually coming to my EAS date. And I asked them about their experience. And when it came to comparing their experience within the boot camps that they attended and the experience of the people that attended Code Platoon, it seemed like Code Platoon students or previous alumni just had a much better just had a good time being here. They were working with with other members of the military community, which definitely helps in the transition process. I feel like
Absolutely.
I feel like everybody undermines the transition process. Everyone's always like, "Oh, that won't affect me," but it gets you. And
It does.
yeah, and it definitely helped me a lot just interacting with people that I could still be comfortable with, relate to, talk to as if I was still in the community of the Marine Corps. So that was fantastic, and it really helped me a lot being able to adapt to this new environment and being able to learn. I feel like being comfortable with my peers and with the instructors because they knew my background, so they kind of had like an expectation of the personality that I had. It really helped me being able to ask questions, be able to understand the material that was being delivered, and just get a couple of different comparisons from instructors that were sometimes military related. And it really helped me just retain information while being here. It was just a fantastic experience overall.
That's great to hear. And I mean, you know, that's of course what we try to convince people coming in is that, you know, this is a different environment than most of what you're going to find in the civilian world. It's not that we're teaching some secret sauce. You know, it's not like Python and JavaScript can't be learned elsewhere. But like you said, that transition process is a lot bigger than a lot of people realize. I personally think, and maybe this is my own bias speaking through, but I think for combat arms, it's even more so because we're leaving, and you did the same, left a world that is vastly different than anything in the civilian world, right? You just don't live your life the same way. It's not just that you have a uniform on, and it's not just that you're using a lot of acronyms. You're living an entirely different life, and that infantry combat lifestyle is all consuming. So tell me a little bit about how, so you end up, you make this transition, you go through Code Platoon, but then you're ending up in an instructor role here at Code Platoon. First, tell me, like, what was your motivation for staying as part of the organization? You're not just like, hey, I'm out of here, I'm going to go do my thing. And second, like, what lessons did you learn in the past? Because I know you did some instructing in the Marine Corps. What lessons did you learn moving forward into teaching a vastly different skill set?
Yeah, that's great. All right, let me tackle it one step at a time. Those are
A lot. It's a lot.
yeah. So the first one is what made me want to stick around or how did I end up here? Pretty much I was always taught that if something great is given to you, you should always try to give back to the community or to those who come after you in one way, shape, or form, right? Whether that's leaving behind a document that's like full of notes, leaving something like a structure, or there's always that saying that you should always leave something better than the way you left it, right? So when I was looking at the graduation for Code Platoon, I knew that I was going to be job hunting soon. So at first I wanted to just reach out and say, hey, I know there's volunteers that volunteer for TA positions in the evening. I could focus on job hunting and attending school in the afternoon or in the morning. And then when it's time to TAs take over in the evening and give back to the community, to give back to the current students, I could step in. I just wanted to be involved and make sure that I was doing my part in facilitating someone else that could be going through my shoes. Like you mentioned, going from the infantry community to this was a considerable change.
Sure.
And whatever help I could give anybody else coming through the same footsteps, I wanted to make sure that I was there to give it. From there, I worked in a couple of startups during the day, but Code Platoon was able to reach out to me and they said, "Hey, if you would like to actually do a full um, TA position like the one that we do during the day, we would be more than happy to have you." So I came, immediately took that opportunity, started as a TA, still worked at a couple of startups in my off time, but primarily I was a TA, and then I think I came back as a TA for two cohorts. So I did two cohorts in total as a TA. And I remember one of the cohorts that I was currently TAing for started this, oh, you should hire Francisco kind of thing. And then they started leaving behind in retros like, oh, hey, Francisco's here. Why not hire him to give instruction? And I think that kind of put a little bit of pressure on the people in charge of the hiring process. And they sure enough, shortly after I was offered a position as a full-time instructor, which was great. I love instructing. And then this is going to kind of take me into the lessons that I learned. Additionally to being interacting with the problem solving capabilities. When I was in the Marine Corps, I became an instructor, and I found out that something that I found really enjoyable when instructing is not the whole process of instruction or the stuff that we're doing on a day-to-day basis, but rather seeing the students evolve, right? Rather, it's a drastic evolution when you're teaching at the School of Infantry.
Indeed.
But it's still a pretty considerable evolution when you're teaching here at Code Platoon, right? You go from teaching just basic functions and algorithms and hey, this is a variable. And by the end, when graduation comes around, I'm getting questions about WebSockets, channels, and servers being deployed on different cloud services and how do they talk to each other. And it's fantastic just seeing students that I know 3 months ago were just building functions and now they're building entire web servers that are being launched on AWS. It's great and it's a very self-fulfilling feeling to know like maybe I'm giving myself too much credit, but I would like to think that I have impacted people's lives in a positive manner.
Oh, you most certainly do, and I don't think you're giving yourself enough credit. So yeah, don't you're a humble guy, so we appreciate that, but you deserve a lot of credit in that process, and I think you're absolutely right. Seeing that transition of people having those aha moments and that evolution of learning what they can do. There's a lot of people who come into every new discipline with that kind of imposter syndrome, but when they have that moment of recognition of wait a second, I can do this. On that note, so we'll transition a little bit to the topic of curriculum itself. So you talked about teaching some of these things. Tell us a little bit about what in your time at Code Platoon, from when you came as a student and what you're implementing now as an instructor, what evolutions are you seeing in the actual technologies being taught and how are you handling that? For example, we get a lot of questions about AI. AI is, of course, the key buzzword of what are you guys doing with AI and how is that changing the role of the software developer? How have you seen that evolution from your perspective? And how are you implementing those lessons learned, those changes into the students who are coming to Code Platoon now?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when it comes to AI specifically, we're noticing the industry trend where essentially AI is starting to become part of the tech stack, right? It's more of a essential tool or something that's becoming very common. Not I wouldn't call it common knowledge, but something that's desired in the tech world for people to have that knowledge. So with that said, Code Platoon has been making efforts to ensure that that gets included. Our first iteration of that was, well, people have all of these tools like ChatGPT and all these other AI capabilities on the web, but most people don't really understand how they should be talking to these machines or these tools, right? It's not as simple as one may think. You can't just ask it a general question and expect it to give you a very good answer. So we started there in teaching people this is what this tool actually is and how it works under the hood so that people can understand, well, if I need something that's this specific, then these are the details that I need to provide it. Otherwise, it's not going to be able to give me a good answer. With that said, we took it a step further this go around, and currently we're working on actually developing a module that should be around 7 to 8 days, where we'll actually be walking students through building neural networks and building their own learning models that will either work on binary evaluation or have a question and answer functionality. So that's currently where we're at. We're building this module to ensure that students can get that tool with PyTorch, so that when they leave the program, they feel more than confident being able to talk about that technology. And hopefully they themselves take it upon themselves to go out there and get even more knowledge so that they can build different other types of models when they get out to the real industry.
And that's great to hear because, again, like I said, we get a lot of questions about that very topic. Do you see this with LLMs, with large language models? Do you see the evolution occurring so fast that it is hard to keep up with in terms of changing curriculum? Or do you see this as something of the outside world is seeing it one way, but really, if we dial it down, those changes, those evolutions are pretty easy to explain from an instructor perspective, or is there a little bit in between that?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit in the middle. I definitely think that people are seeing it as something more where it's changing on a daily basis and it's evolving in a crazy amounts. It's not necessarily to that point, but it is a changing technology and it is a growing field, right? A perfect example of that is I'm currently reading a book and the entire that talks about the entire neural networks and how to build them. And I think the first version of the book came out last year, and as of now, they just released their beta for version 3. Right. So in one year,
In
they've
one
built
year.
different books that covers this one specific topic. So it's changing, it's evolving, and just like everything in tech, it's important to just read up on things, stay familiarized, and you don't necessarily have to keep track of every single change if it doesn't necessarily apply to what you're building. Um, but that also depends on what it is that you're building. And that's the great thing about tech. You can't ever know everything, right? Like regardless of how much time you spend reading documentation, working with a technology, there's always going to be something new. There's always
Right.
going to be something better that you can make and apply.
Right. On that note, so going back to this concept of lessons from the infantry, I think back to my time in the infantry, and I think, okay, if we have new technologies come out, whether it's a new battle rifle or a new, type of rucksack or new boots, or even a vehicle that gets you to and from the battle better and more efficiently, it doesn't change the fundamentals of combat, right? The fundamentals are shoot, move, and communicate. No matter
Right.
what, it doesn't matter what technology you have. That's the fundamentals of combat. So, what are the fundamentals in light of that? What are the fundamentals in this world that are not changing that you look for in students to say, hey, this is what you have to have in order to adapt to these new technologies?
Yeah, that's a really awesome. So when it comes to being able to solve problems, I always say this to students, like every framework or every language is essentially the same. They all they all serve their specific purpose, and some of them are better at doing one specific thing than others. But the way of building them or coming up to the end process, the process is always going to be the same, right? Like if I'm building a backend server, I know I'm going to need URLs, some sort of model view controller, and then something that interacts with the database to actually build my table. Um, and then there's always going to be serialized. I think it's more of, if you, just like you said, the concept is shoot, move, and communicate, right? Well, in programming, if you understand the steps for what it is that you're trying to build, so building a server, I need API endpoints, and I need model view controllers with models, right? Very basic. Well, there's three things. As long as I understand that those are the three things that I need to build, regardless of what framework I'm using, I could always look up the syntax, but I know those are the three things that I need to build this one tool. And that kind of stretches across the board with the technologies. As long as you understand the steps to building what it is that you're trying to build, then you could take each individual step and just look it up, read about it. All
Sure.
the documentation's out there. None of it's a secret, right? None of it's secret sauce, just like you mentioned. It's all out there. Just understand the step at its most basic level, and then go out there and read about it and implement it. And then the implementation part is key. Like the more you do it, the more you understand it. And then the moment that you feel like you truly understand it, you're going to do something that's going to make you realize that you don't understand it. And then you keep going over and over again.
The more
That's
you
what
learn about something, the more you know you don't know. And yeah,
exactly.
I'm sure that rings true here. It does in every area I've studied. So dialing that back a little bit though, so we've got a little bit technical there and we don't have a lot of time left. Dialing it back and looking big picture, someone comes to this and they're curious about whether or not they can do this. They might have heard everything you just said and they're like, wow, that seems cool, but it's also somewhat overwhelming. I'm not sure if this is for me. What do you tell that person right now? The person who's getting ready to get out of the military or has just gotten out, or maybe they've been out for a couple of years and they're kind of lost. What do you tell that person about coming to this career path? Is it everybody can do it? Is it no, not necessarily? Or, what words of advice do you have for that person who's in that position?
Yeah. So let's see. If I were to talk about it from my own perspective, I didn't know how to code any code at all until 1 month before I applied to Code Platoon. 1 month before I applied to Code Platoon, I picked up a course on Code Academy, I think, and it was over JavaScript, and that got me through the application process. Right. And then once I got through the application process, I didn't code again until I actually started Code Platoon. And by then, all of my coding fundamentals were like gone.
Lost.
Yeah. With that said, I was able to go through the entire program with essentially zero knowledge and get to the end state. And I'm not gonna say I didn't get to the end state because I was able to slide within the cracks or because I was handheld. I was able to get to that end state because of the way the program is designed. Right? The program is designed to teach each individual fundamental at its purest level so that it can build upon, right? And just like everything that or at least everything in the infantry is like, as long as you have the fundamentals, you can stretch those out later, but the fundamentals are always what's most important. All right, we dedicate ourselves to drilling those basic concepts or those basic fundamentals because we know that if those aren't there and well built, when we go to stretch out, that people can have trouble, right? With that said, there's always TA support as well, and then your peers are the fact that it's the veteran community is just brings in so much support altogether because it's not you're always comfortable to just say, hey, I don't understand what's happening. Do you think you could help me out? And I think it's rare if anybody will ever say no to that question. Um,
Sure.
I wouldn't go to the extent of saying that coding is for everyone. Just like everything in the world, it requires an acquired taste. But I do think that people can do it if they put their minds to it. And here at Code Platoon, I can assure anyone watching that we are here to ensure that if you really want this, we will support you to get to that end state.
Indeed. I mean, that's very well said. And I'll add on to that. The cool thing about that I've always been impressed by as an organization, obviously I've been here 4.5 years now, but the thing that I've been impressed by is that you can do so much for free. The question arises, if that question arises in you, says, can I do this? There's only your time is required at the beginning to figure out whether or not this is the right path, for you. So yeah, and I see what those fundamentals are so important. And I think once people grasp that, I think that they can draw from their military experience, no matter what it was, because every branch of the military kind of hammers that same thing. The US military has that figured out in our basic trainings, as a way to impart those fundamental concepts. Yeah, that's not going to make you an expert in any area, whether it's being a fighter jet pilot or a ship captain or a submarine, anything, infantry. You still have fundamentals that you have to learn, and then you can expand on that. So we only have a couple minutes left, maybe like 1 or 2 minutes left. So I'm going to end with the fun question that I always end with, which is totally off topic, and that's okay. You're coding, you're doing your work. What music do you listen to? Or do you listen to music at all?
Oh, yes. I listen to classic jazz. And
Classic jazz, like who? Name a couple artists. Who's at the top?
I don't know the artist. I always just look up on YouTube classic jazz and I let that play in the background.
Oh, okay. Well, that's great. So it's fascinating because there was I had a whole episode with musicians. None of them could listen to music at all because they were too distracted by it. So they listened to nothing. So it's interesting.
Oh,
People's different response. Miles Davis. So go with Miles Davis and John Coltrane. That's a standard there in classic jazz. I'm huge fans of both of those. So do you have any parting thoughts? Any parting thoughts for anyone who might be watching this and they're, thinking about Code Platoon, they want to know anything? Closing thoughts.
yeah, definitely. For anyone that's thinking about attending Code Platoon, I would say, first of all, try. You don't lose anything by trying, and the most you can benefit is you find out, wow, I tried this out. I actually love this being able to build these programs or being able to build these functions and writing a script and communicating to a computer. And if you find out that you love it, then from there, take to the next steps. But it's most important that you just try. Don't overthink it. Don't think about where you should start. Don't think about what programming language you should learn first. Just pick up something, maybe the first thing that pops up on the internet as far as you're interested in programming. Start here, click on that, and then go from there. See if you like it. And then from there, if you're interested, come to Code Platoon and we'll make sure to get you the rest of the way.
Love it. You provide some of the best. If we ever do video shorts at Code Platoon, those shorts that go on YouTube, you're going to have like a whole series of money quotes, I think, from this. So, Francisco, I appreciate your time. I know you're busy. You got to get back to teaching, actual students. So I appreciate your time and effort here. My name is Greg Drobny. You can reach me, greg@codeplatoon.org. And to be honest, Francisco's always open to answering questions as well. So email me if you have any questions. Again, greg@codeplatoon.org, and I'm happy to talk to you more about what we do here. Thanks again, Francisco, and thank you all for tuning in and watching.
Thank you, Greg. Appreciate it.
You have a good one.
Likewise.